You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, please go ahead and get us started.
Hey, I'm Ivan Zach, and before introducing our guest today, I just want to give another shout out to Ukraine and Ukrainian army that are doing incredible things by destroying the Russian Nazi that invaded our country, and we hope that this will be over soon. But can't be more excited to see my colleague and a friend, Dr. Dave Nicol. He's back on this podcast. Here we're on another. You're all over. Everybody knows you. But for those that don't, Dr. Dave Nicol is a veterinarian with more than 20 years of experience, general practice, and has held several leadership roles within practice and industry. Dr. Nicol wrote 3 books, most recently the best-selling So You're a Vet, Now What? A manifesto on how to survive a veterinarian after graduation. He hosts the Blunt Dissection podcast and also owns a practice in London. He speaks at conferences all over the world about his favorite topics on leadership and generally cheerleading for the veterinary profession. In 2019, he has voted VMX Practice Manager Speaker of the Year. Dave, very excited to see you here. Thank you for finding the time.
Ivan, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks very much for having me.
So, what is new? We're talking about VetX International Ltd. You're big on leadership culture. So, what is VetX International, and how is that related to all many things that you do?
It's a question I get asked often, and one that I've actually been working really hard to clarify, because it's not what it started out as many businesses aren't. But it's in its simplest, when we boil away everything, the elevator pitch, I guess, is we help veterinary professionals build the professional skills that they require to have good careers, and we help them find good homes for those skills, i.e. good practices. And on the flip side, we help practices develop great cultures and then find great vets to work within those cultures.
So, my sarcastic question immediately, wait, spaying dogs and treating kennel cough is not what we need to be great veterinarians?
It's a funny thing. I was thinking why it was I had such fun in my career. So although the last 6 years have not been in clinical practice, the first 17 were, and 10 of those were sort of more in leadership roles, but never ever leaving clinical practice completely. That was actually one of the challenges I faced in my career, was not being able to jump on one or the other completely. And I was thinking, what was it that made it so enjoyable for all those 17 years? And I would still quite happily go back to it tomorrow if this other stuff I was doing wasn't so exciting. And it was the relationships with my fellow human beings. And that's, I think, the area of greatest challenge that we face in our profession. Yes, there are problems with the volume of work. There's problems with the efficiency of work. We all know about burnout, but burnout is a state of stress that it's a sustained state of stress that we exist in. And a lot of it is absolutely self-defeating, interpersonal skills that we just have not ever really taken terribly seriously as vets. We never really had to take terribly seriously. So we create lots of situations and create lots of tension and stress for ourselves that is pretty avoidable. And I think that's, when I'm interviewing vets, whether it's the podcast or I'm working and coaching with vets, that's one of the constants that shows up, is the people who are crushing it, who are enjoying their careers. They're really, really good with people. Now, they're also pretty good with the clinical skills as well. But we all know vets that are loving their career who are not so good clinically. And I actually think back to so many of my very, very early mentors who you just think, wow, they just had clients eating out the palm of their hand, but I'm not sure I would have wanted any of them treating my pets. But that was yesterday's year. That was yesterday's medicine. What that generation had in abundance was the ability to work with humans. And that was one of the blessings I got from working with the previous generation. And I'm fortunate to have twigged that early, or perhaps just have been a talkative SOB from day one.
I want to follow with another sarcastic question about, if you're becoming a veterinarian, you're not working only with pets? Because that's a lot of people think that, well, I don't like people, so I'm going to work with pets.
Man, how many coffee have you had today, Ivan? You're just a bowl of cherries this morning.
But you don't have to answer that. I know the answer, and it's funny that not only the culture and leadership, but I was going through. I don't remember where I read this stat, but you're probably familiar with it too. Is that out of all professions, veterinarians statistically is the lowest EQ out there. It's generally just the lowest EQ people.
I mean, when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. I think the higher the IQ, it's a generalization, and it's not an absolute fit. We can't always say people with high IQ have low EQ, but there is a relationship there. And then if you think about why people end up in veterinary medicine, it's to move away from people. Otherwise, we might be in one of the other professions. It's certainly, we're not here for the money. We're not here for the people. We're here for the animals. So I have no trouble in, that feels like a logical outcome. I'd love to see the actual data on that.
Yeah, it's so interesting, Dave, and it's something definitely worth like exploring a little bit more. So this idea of human to human interaction and people like the three of us that feed off of it, that do it all day, every hour of the day, and then people that walk away from it or shy away from it. And it'd be interesting just to kind of like maybe open up that a little bit more, and what you've seen from a training and a development perspective that can help people lean into that. Because truly, when you're dealing with the public, if that's something that's uncomfortable to you, it's easy to see how that can manifest as stress and burnout and all kinds of other nasty things. So let's hear it. What else you got on the topic?
One of the things that we thought was really important to do was to start gathering veterinary specific data. And I know you guys are sort of big with this as well. Data helps us make much better decisions. Human factors data is fairly hard when it's a sociological perspective to gather in a way that doesn't introduce all kinds of bias. So I'm going to put that caveat out there to start with. But we've started to build some survey and data sets together to look at some of the things that are really important when it comes to having a good experience. And fortunate enough to work with some of the bigger organizations on the planet in their graduate training capacities, and then survey those individuals. And so we actually asked, as part of a wider survey, we asked a question, and the numbers aren't huge, but we're talking 150 odd responses from people in their first 2 years of their career. What are the three things that energize you the most? And what are the three things that drain you the most? And we didn't just get three answers. We obviously got a spectrum of answers. But when we collated all that information and put them together, I wonder if you take a guess on what are the things that drain us the most? What was the number one thing would be your guess?
Talking to owners.
Okay, clients, exactly. And it was about 70+% of that was the biggest column. 75% of respondents had that one in there. The next one down, and it starts to get a little interesting at that point, but the next one down of drainers of energy starts to be things that are complexity of cases. And that's a bit of a bucket, because you actually put cases that are actually quite challenging clinically in there, but it's also then structurally, what are the elements that make it complicated to work through a case? And that comes out as way too many exams backed up together, not enough time to work things out properly. And then the third category of things that really stress people out or drain people are then relationships between people on the team. So human factors are just massively important. When you look at the things that we can fix, some of those things are obviously structural. Now, what we spend all of our time moaning about, you see this playing out on every social media site. What do we moan about? We moan about our colleagues, we moan about clients, we moan about not having enough time to do cases. So it tracks. What was really interesting, though, is we asked people, well, what are the three things that energize you, that fill your buckets the most? And I wonder if you can guess what the top of that list was. No, this is where it gets super mind-bending. It's clients.
I was going to say I was going to say the same things. Yeah.
It was clients. Now, it's not as high a number, but it's like getting up to sort of 55, 56% of people. It's clients that show appreciation. So it's not just clients. So what it is the emotional state of clients is what we're talking about there. Because you and I know that if you have a client that you treat well and is a good human being, you're probably going to have a good interaction. But if you've got a client who's not in a good emotional state and you're not emotionally intelligent enough to know how to recognize that state and manipulate that state to a place that you can work with it, you're probably going to have a much harder interaction. So I thought that was really interesting. Clients energize us. The next category down that energize us was teams and good cultures, places where we feel appreciated. And the third category down was challenging cases that we can work up and get out of. So they're laid bare. What was exciting about this for me was it's not veterinary medicine that's the problem. It's our experience of veterinary medicine. And it's so massively tilted toward the human factors, the softer professional skills. And yes, we cannot take out the fact that there are structural challenges that are affecting the industry and we need to do things about those things. But most of us as individuals, as vets, it's not within our power to restructure or reorganize our practice. It is within our power to work on our emotional intelligence or our communication skills. And so it feels like for me, the place that I want to spend my time and energy is helping people with something that they can directly, not just influence, but take charge of. Everybody can influence their leadership groups in order to change the situations in their practices. And the market to an extent is because it's voting with its feet and leaving because they're all burned out. So that's making leadership all over the place pay attention. But it's interesting to be able to have individuals work on that themselves. For me, that's a great place. That's a point of massive leverage where we can have great impacts if people can take this seriously.
Dave, there's so many layers of that onion that I want to peel back. And the first and obvious one, it's a quick one, is did you have segmentation between corporate consolidators and private practice for those answers? And I'm not going to let you answer. I'm going to add another question on top to make it a little bit more complicated for you because it's late in the day for you. You're in almost at the end of your day.
And I'm peaking. I'm like 3 cups of tea in, man. Like Ivan's just getting warmed up.
I know. Well, you get to see what all the listeners don't, which is the constant fight back and forth for me and Ivan's attention and us wanting to ask questions to you. Exactly. And then the next question is, so recently I'm working with a large corporate consolidator to implement our solution, which is a time-saving solution to their organization. And I was like, how are we going to measure success together? And they're like, well, if they can see one more patient a day, then we're successful. And I'm like, well, listen, I can save you, 30 minutes, an hour for that veterinarian, but I can't guarantee that they're not going to maybe take a lunch that day or maybe take a walk around the park or, maybe finish a case properly instead of rushing through it. I can't do that. There's nothing my software will do to allow you to do that. So I was like, I don't accept that success criteria. And if that has to be one, then I don't want to work with you. We got past that. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on both of those things.
I love a lot about what you said there. And by the way, I'm not going to go beating up on corporate here. And the answer to your first question is this group set was within corporate life. So no independent. And that posed a bigger question for us. So we're actually about to launch and would encourage and love any listeners to take the survey. It's called the VEER survey. This is the Veterinary Employment Engagement and Retention Survey, where we're going to look much deeper across all of the different sectors. And we hope to attract thousands of veterinarians in gainful employment, whether they're happy or not in general practice, or different sectors to take the survey so we can start to join the dots on, well, actually, it's a vet who graduated from, Colorado State, who works here with this amount of salary and this. What are the things that start to line up with happiness? And how do we define happiness anyways? And so there's various components of that survey. It's a little more complicated, but should allow us to start articulating and identifying where the real pain points are. Part 2 of your question then, I just think it's really interesting that was the answer of, okay, what does good look like? And it highlights exactly the problem for ownership versus, and the distance, the delta between where the owners sit in the organization. In the C-suite, that's the conversation to the board level. Whereas in the trenches, the veterinarians, the clinical staff, that's just not a metric that matters when you're dropping like flies. And it shouldn't matter in the C-suite either. Like the smart C-suite isn't, that veterinarian needs to get 30 minutes for their lunch. Like that veterinarian needs to be able to get through their day without having a urethral catheter in, so they can actually go to the toilet the way nature intended, than just piss in a bag all day, right? So that's where we'd get to. Like, we've not got time to eat. Okay, we'll stick an O tube in there and we'll stick a urethral catheter in there. What's the problem, guys? Like, just keep going, and we'll pump some happy chemicals in here. Like,
It works only temporarily.
I was just in Vegas. Maybe that's solution. Maybe they need to start pumping oxygen into all the veterinary hospitals to allow people to work until midnight. Maybe that'll fix everything that's wrong in the
oh, there we
industry.
go. Okay, so here's innovation, right? We'll just get an O
And
tube for
allow them to
food.
smoke in the hospital. Maybe there's some things to learn from Vegas.
You get an O tube for food, you get a catheter for piss, you get a bag for anything, for any excrement, and you get like on tap amphetamines. And then what's the issue, guys? Just keep
Yeah, we
going.
should be able to burn veterinarians on both sides of the
That
table
works
for
very
everything for
temporarily.
like maybe a year. We'll probably get a year out of each veterinarian. Yeah, exactly. At
I
least
think we solved the
temporarily.
problem. Okay, no, okay, so just so nobody takes that too seriously, or yells at us. Like, obviously, don't take drugs, kids. Like, it's not funny, and don't fit catheters where they're not necessary. And please take your breaks and eat properly. But the measures of success surely have to be based around engagement scores of, the happy team, the happy culture retains people longer. It hurts us all when one veterinary medicine bounces out like the bouncy ball and bounces out the other side of general practice life. It hurts everybody. So I don't know, there's so many people see it as for me, when people work with me in my practice, I want them to get good skills. I do not want them to burn out. When they leave, I want them to leave happy because they go to another job where we've been a stepping stone for them. And I'm okay with that, because I know they're going to say good things and say, it's going to be an employer branding bright spot for me, which is going to come back. That karma is going to work out well. But broadly, if we all did that, and if we were able to stop burning people out, we'd have a much bigger pool of talent to recruit from, and we wouldn't be so reliant on the meat grinder effect of just more vet schools, like more people to hook up to the bag. Let's go, So the metric has to be about more around engagement. And I think things like team net promoter scores, there's so many softwares out there that can take the emotional temperature of an organization, but how about how psychologically safe and productive? Like, let's put those two things on our X and Y axis and see what shows up in the results.
And I'm going to just jump in because Ivan did it to me last episode and say, if organizations took those things seriously, they would be amazed and astonished, I truly believe, with what would happen to their profitability.
They would. The problem is, it wouldn't happen overnight. And that is the problem with every single component of leadership. I struggle, with the exception of recruiting somebody who is vastly better than the previous person at selling something. That is an instant 20, 30, 50% increase in revenue that's very measurable. But when you're working with a group of 1,000 veterinarians or several thousand veterinarians, that's a drop in the ocean. Everything else about leadership, from vision, culture farming, as I call it, takes time for the rewards to show up. And it takes time that somebody who's in a leadership position has to put something else down. That something else is clinical, which is revenue now. But as I like to describe these tasks, they're $10,000 or $100,000 an hour tasks, like shaping and sculpting your culture, considering the fit for your organization and your values, building the recruitment process that reliably brings you people that match those things, are all $10,000 to $100,000 an hour tasks that will bring huge gains down the track. But you will have to forfeit some $1,000 an hour work now, which means your revenue might take a little wobble for a short amount of time as you figure this stuff out in order to move forwards. And you see that in every aspect of leadership. It's almost a fractal concept. Look at coaching. Like, somebody comes and asks you how to do something. The temptation, and most people do this, is I'll just do it myself because it's quicker. Then train this person, mentor them, coach them how to do that. That takes more time now, so I've got less time now. But it's a freedom button that allows you much more time further down the track. But we're so hooked on the insta reward that leadership just gets kicked down to another day. And it's tragic, because that is I think at the core of a lot of the challenges we face, whether we're in corporate or independent practice. The corporate practice wants the money, the EBITDA now. The private practice, it's addicted to the clinical because it's, if you're an owner operator, a veterinarian, fixing animals is what you're on God's earth to do. But there's only one person can shape vision that effectively. It's the owner.
The everything that you're saying is just so much aligned with what I was trying to do for the last 3.5 years. Because I thought if we'll come up with a methodology to systematically assess the temperature on the culture, on the happiness of people, then consolidators will pick that up. That's what VIS, Veterinary Integration Solutions, was. That was the purpose, to find out how they would listen, that this is important. And we got successful maybe to a degree that they start talking about it. But the major problem, we've discussed it yesterday in the leadership meeting at Galaxy, that some started talking about this. Maybe 1 or 2% started measuring it. Like you said, internal promoter score, how many hours people work, how happy they are. And 0 of them implemented what they learned from measuring. Even if that 1% measures something, what do they do with it? And that was my constant question. The reason why Galaxy came about, I'm using it as a softball for myself, but because for 3.5 years, I kept asking, you start talking to a management team and they say, we're all about happiness of the veterinarians, all about well-being. My first question, how do you measure that? And that's where they just shut up.
How many slices of pizza got ate at the Friday meeting?
Yeah. We buy ice cream on Fridays. Like this is, this is not. And then, okay, if you do measure it, what do you do with it? Do you recheck it after your initiatives that you've done? I do not know a single organization in the veterinary domain globally that at their management level on a weekly leadership team meeting measures happiness of the veterinarians. There's essentially 0 companies that do that. It's a P&L, it's revenue, EBITDA, and everything that drives those. And then we talk a little bit about that. So then when you're hiring people, you're hiring people towards the core values and mission that you sat down and thought of what it would be nice to tell them we do. Not what we do and believe in. It's what it would be nice to tell them that we do, and then hire towards core values, which we don't practice or believe in,
No.
but they should, because that sounds awesome.
Recruitment is catfishing right now, largely.
Oh, yeah.
You too. I'm going to have to cut you off because otherwise we're going to be here all day. So, Dave, sorry to do that to you because I want to continue this conversation. It's incredible. But we make a promise to our listeners to record for about 20 minutes. And so here we are, 23 minutes in. So, Dave, we like to wrap it up the same way every time. 2 questions. First is a book, a TED Talk, a YouTube video, something that's inspired you on your incredible journey. And man, it's been fun to have you on this show. It's been a long time coming. So thanks for being here.
Pleasure. Well, the book is Conscious Business by Fred Kofman. Absolutely brilliant read. I think if leaders just read that one book and executed on it, the world would be a heck of a lot better place.
That's awesome. And then you have a large network. Who would you recommend to be invited on the show?
One of my favorite people, and I think if you've not had her on the show, I think she is one of the best entrepreneurs in the space, is going to be Mary Gardner all day long. I worked with her as a coaching client. She blows my socks off the way her brain thinks structurally about making businesses from that size into big size. She just released, she doesn't just do one book, she just dropped 3 books. It makes me a little bit sick. I can talk to her enough, perfectly honest. I learned something cool every time.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinarynnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.